As chaos and destruction rained down upon the surface of Terraria, people fled in all directions only to be hunted down and killed. Others hid but were inevitably captured to work as slaves for an inconceivable master. Some, though, managed to avoid the gaze of their would-be overlords, finding refuge in the dark caverns underground. But in their would-be sanctuary, other dangers lurked and festered, eventually infecting the survivors and consuming them whole.
Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, with different is less likely to get me horribly
In ancient times, when calamity fell from the sky and scorched the ground in the fires of corruption, the people of Terraria reacted in very different ways. There were those who welcomed the strange cosmic visitor, even bowing before it as a divine lord, and were rewarded for their trust with enslavement. There were others who fought the bizarre creature from beyond the stars, only to be cut down as though their opposition was nothing. Most people ran, however, fleeing in whatever way they could, but little by little, the corruption's tainted touch caught up with them, sentencing them to the same fate as everyone else. But then there was another group, a collection of people who neither submitted nor ran, but instead hid. While many shelters were uncovered and summarily destroyed, some fugitives followed cave systems deep into the ground, finding themselves in large caverns carved out over eons by the never-ending trickle of water through the crags in the earth. Down here, the survivors were far away from the terror polluting the surface, away from the gaze of unwanted attention. Down here, they may be able to start again. At first, they lived from day to day, pitching tents or sleeping on the bare rock, scrounging up any morsels of food they could, while fending off the vicious creatures that lived in the subterranean darkness. In time, the unwitting pioneers would grow familiar with their new surroundings, beginning to see the creatures they lived alongside more of a resource than a threat, and constructing makeshift shelters in the cavern walls. This would not do though. If this was to be their home, then it must feel like it. It was not enough for the survivors to merely go on existing. They had to maintain genuine lives if they were to keep alive the hope that they would one day reclaim the surface. Expeditions travelled to the overworld to find resources and relics of their old lives, so that they might recreate what they had lost in an underground bastion of civilization. Every single one of the survivors knew what they were risking each time they travelled to the surface, and knew all too well how much safer it would have been to just go on hiding in the dark crevices. But then they would have been little better than the animals they lived alongside. At first, their follies above ground were simple: get into their old homes, grab as much as they could, and then duck back underground before the roving creatures of corruption found them. The first raids netted the survivors random items of clothing, trinkets, and often rotten foodstuffs, but the more they did, the more focused they became. Soon their planning allowed them to conduct raids more like military operations, knowing exactly where they needed to go, and getting out with everything they needed before anyone knew they were there. Of course there were casualties, mostly the consequence of unforeseen conditions or foolhardy actions. Each time they would learn though, learning the behaviour of the corrupt beings, until a bold proposal was made. No longer did the survivors wish to live in caves and hollows, no matter how full of comforts they were. They wished to live in homes once more, and so a project was proposed that would take their most skilled raiders to the surface to retrieve important building materials not found beneath ground, primarily wood. Dismantling the walls of their old homes would take too much effort and deprive them of shelter during raids, so they resorted to chopping down full trees and transporting them beneath the surface. Working in shifts when they would not be noticed, the survivors managed to build a stockpile of wood that they would soon refine and use to construct houses in the caverns they had come to call home. In time, these houses sprang up all through the underground, continually populated with more and more bits and pieces of the old world. The residents would even end up mining the caverns in search of precious metals that they could craft into more extravagant decorations and equipment. At last, they would become so comfortable in their new lives that the hope they had fought so hard to cling on to began to fade, and the surface became nothing more than a distant memory. The lives they had built were never destined to last though, for as soon as they had ventured into their new underground world, a curse had befallen them. The water they had been forced to drink to survive in the caverns had been tainted, not by some terrible pathogen, but by a substance of eternal life. The slimes. Creatures literally formed from the blood of godly beings, often swam in the underground pools, the oils from their gelatinous bodies mixing with the water around them. In small doses, the oils were thought to have healing properties, but in the amounts the survivors were inadvertently consuming, it would lead to nigh on immortality. The everlasting life granted to the refugees was different, however. It would allow a person to live indefinitely, but their body would continue to grow old and wither until they were nothing more than animate skeletons. Without knowing what was happening to them, the cavern dwellers were driven to madness and abandoned their homes, turning on one another in the process, attempting to kill friends and family members, but none of it was to any avail. Every time one of their number was broken into parts, after a while they would inevitably reconstitute and go on living, only experiencing the freedom of true death when their bones eventually turned to dust. Most lamented their torturous existence of eternal madness and pain, but there was one who seemed to make the most of their dire situation. One who would go on to sell the trinkets of the survivors past, while maintaining himself with the very substance that led to his predicament. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and want to support the channel, then please consider subscribing and hit that bell so that YouTube might possibly inform you when a new video comes out. If you want to go that bit further, please feel free to support the channel on Patreon or go and buy some merchandise on Spreadshirt and Teespring. Links are all down in the description. Other than that, have a great day and I'll see you next time.